June 6, 1944, 6:30 in the morning. The first landing craft ramp drops on a 5-mile stretch of Norman coastline the Allies have codenamed Omaha. The men of the 29th and 1st Infantry Divisions step into water already churning with machine gun fire, and the killing begins before the first boot touches sand. In the opening minutes, entire companies are cut down at the waterline. By the end of this day, this single beach will cost more American lives than any other on D-Day. Close to 2,400 casualties on a strip of sand no longer than a small town. Omaha is the worst of the 5 beaches, and it is the worst by design. Behind the sand rise bluffs more than 100 feet high, and built into those bluffs are 15 German strongpoints with interlocking fields of fire, concrete casemates, mortar pits, and machine gun nests, positioned to rake the beach from one end to the other. There is no cover. The only exits are 5 narrow valleys called draws, and every one of them is a prepared kill zone. Then place one thing on that beach that the year 1944 cannot account for. In the third wave, riding a craft that crosses the water faster than the German gunners have ever had to track, comes a company of United States Marines from the year 2026. 180 riflemen in modern body armor, carrying weapons that will not be invented for another 60 years. And riding ashore with them, carried across the obstacle line on a hovercraft moving at 40 knots, is the single piece of equipment that will decide their sector of this battle. 1 M1A2 Abrams main battle tank. 73 tons of armor and firepower from a future none of the men dying on this sand could picture. The irony is sharp, because armor was supposed to be here. 29 amphibious Sherman tanks were launched that morning to swim ashore ahead of the infantry. In the heavy seas, 27 of them flooded and sank within minutes of leaving their landing craft, dragging most of their crews to the bottom of the channel. The infantry that had been promised tank support stepped onto Omaha with none. The single Abrams arriving in this scenario is the armor the beach never had. To understand what the tank changes, the German side has to be understood first. And the Germans on these bluffs are not who Allied intelligence said they would be. The men in the first wave were briefed to expect a thin defense. A single under-strength static garrison of older men and conscripts. The reality on the bluffs was harder. The German 352nd Infantry Division, a full-strength and combat-capable formation, was present in the sector, and the assault troops were not prepared for a defense this strong. The gap between what the men of the 29th Division expected and what they actually walked into is one of the reasons Omaha becomes a slaughter. The strong points are the second reason. The Germans call them Widerstandsnester, resistance nests, and they are numbered along the length of the beach. Each is a self-contained fortress of reinforced concrete, sited not to fire out to sea, but to fire sideways along the sand, so that every yard of Omaha sits inside overlapping cones of machine gun fire. A man on the beach is never being shot at from in front. He is being shot at from both flanks at once. The deadliest of them is a position designated WN62, dug into the bluff above the eastern half of the beach. From inside it, a German machine gunner named Heinrich Severloh will spend the morning feeding belt after belt into his weapon. By some accounts, he fires more than 10,000 rounds before the position falls. Whatever the exact number, the men advancing into his arc of fire die in rows. WN62 is one of several reasons the first wave at Omaha barely moves off the tide line. This is the beach the modern Marines are landing on, and the moment their hovercraft crosses the obstacle belt, the first thing the Germans learn is that something on this beach is different. The obstacle belt itself is the first problem that Abrams faces. The Germans have seeded the tide line with steel hedgehogs, angled stakes tipped with mines, and gate-like barriers of welded girders, all designed to tear the bottom out of landing craft. The hovercraft simply rides over the top of them on its cushion of air, something no 1944 vessel could do, and sets the tank down on the sand above the waterline, past the obstacles that are swallowing the conventional landing craft to either side. The machine guns find the tank within seconds. From WN72, the strongpoint guarding the Verville draw at the western end of the beach. A stream of fire that has been cutting men in half all morning hammers into the Abrams hull and does nothing. The rounds spark off the composite armor and spin away into the sand. What the German gunners do not yet understand is that the weapon that has owned this beach since dawn has just become irrelevant. The Marines use the discovery immediately. Rather than scatter across open sand the way the first wave was forced to, they stack behind the tank and move with it, 73 tons of steel walking between them and the guns. It is a tactic the infantry of 1944 never had the option to use, because the armor that was supposed to provide it is at the bottom of the channel. The company crosses the killing zone of the tide line in the one place on Omaha where the bullets cannot reach them. The Abrams turns its main gun on WN-72. The strong point that has held the Verville draw closed all morning, that has stacked bodies at the western exit of the beach, takes a 120mm high explosive round directly into its firing aperture. The concrete casemate that was built to withstand naval gunfire is not built to withstand a precision round placed through its own gun slit. WN-72 stops firing. One of the 5 draws off Omaha has just been cracked open in under a minute. But cracking one strong point does not win a beach, and the Germans on the bluffs begin to adapt. Observers in the higher positions, unable to stop the tank with direct fire, do what trained artillery spotters do. They call for indirect fire. Within minutes, German mortars and field guns sighted behind the bluffs begin dropping shells onto the beach, walking them toward the one target on Omaha that is actually advancing. The first salvo lands long, the second lands closer. A modern tank is not invulnerable to a direct artillery hit on its thinner top armor, and the crew knows it. They keep the Abrams moving, never staying in one position long enough for the spotters to bracket it, while the Marines spread back out and use the obstacles and the dead ground the tank has opened up. The shells chase a target that refuses to hold still, and then the beach produces the one weapon that can actually kill the tank. Inside the strongpoints, the Germans have more than machine guns. Sighted in the casemates are anti-tank guns, including, in the heavier positions, the 88mm gun that earned its reputation as the most feared artillery piece of the war. An 88 firing armor-piercing shot at close range was lethal to the armor of its era, and for decades after it. The duel that follows is the only fight on Omaha where the tank is genuinely tested. The German gun fires first. The shot strikes the front of the Abrams, and the entire tank rings like a struck bell, but the armor holds. A round designed to punch through 80mm of 1944 steel meets composite armor and depleted uranium engineered against threats 6 decades more advanced, and it does not get through. The Marines behind the tank feel the impact in their chests. What the German gun crew does not have time to learn is that they will not get a second shot. The Abrams gunner has already laid the main gun onto the casemate, and the strongpoint that held the heaviest gun on this stretch of beach disappears in a single round. That leaves WN-62, and the gunner inside it who has been killing men all morning. The Abrams turns east and ranges the position dug into the bluff. Heinrich Severloh has been firing into the beach from a height advantage that has made him untouchable to the men crawling below him. He is not untouchable to a 120mm gun. The casemate takes a direct hit. The machine gun that some accounts credit with thousands of casualties falls silent, and the eastern arc of fire that has pinned an entire sector of Omaha to the sand simply switches off. Here is the limit of one tank, and it is not a limit of ammunition or armor. It is a limit of geometry. The Abrams cannot climb the bluff. The only way off the beach for any vehicle is up one of the 5 draws, and a draw has to be cleared on foot before armor can move through it. The tank has cracked the strong points guarding the Verville draw, but it cannot take the high ground itself. That job belongs to the Marines, and it is the moment the human cost of this battle returns, because no amount of future technology removes the need for infantry to climb a hill into the men still defending it. The company moves up the Verville draw under the tank's covering fire. The fighting in the draw is close and ugly. Modern rifles and grenades against German defenders in trenches and bunkers who have not given up simply because their casemates are gone. The Marines take losses here. They are not invulnerable. Their body armor stops some of what would have killed the men of 1944, and their training and weapons give them a decisive edge in the close fight. But the draw is paid for in blood the way every foot of Omaha was paid for in blood. They reach the top of the bluff, and the men who make it to the high ground do what almost no one in the real first wave at Verville lived to do. They turn and look back down at the beach they crossed. From up here, the geometry is obvious. The draw is open. Vehicles can begin moving inland through the gap the tank and the company have torn in the German line. The western end of Omaha has a way off the sand, but the western end of Omaha is not Omaha. The beach is 5 miles long. There are 5 draws. The Abrams is 1 tank, and it has spent the morning deciding the fight at a single one of them. 3 miles to the east, at the Les Moulins draw and the Colville draw, there is no tank. There is no hovercraft. There are only the men of the 1st Infantry Division crossing the same open sand into the same interlocking fire, exactly as they did in history, with exactly the same result. In the sectors the Abrams cannot reach, it is still June 6, 1944 in full, and the price of that morning is still being paid in the thousands. This is the part the technology cannot solve. A single decisive weapon changes the place where it stands. It does not change the places where it is not. The Abrams could be moved east to the next draw, but every minute spent relocating is a minute the Verville sector loses its armor, and the beach is too long for 1 tank to be everywhere it is needed. The Germans understood Omaha as a 5-mile problem. 1 tank can only ever be a 1-draw solution. What the tank cannot do becomes a longer list the further the scenario runs. It cannot occupy France. It cannot hold the bluff. It just helped take, not alone. That requires the follow-on divisions landing behind it. It cannot win the war, or the campaign, or even the rest of D-Day. The Allied invasion still depends on 5 beaches, on the airborne divisions scattered across the Norman hedgerows, on a supply chain that has to cross the channel for months. The Abrams answers 1 tactical question on 1 stretch of 1 beach. Everything beyond that still belongs to the men of 1944. What changes is the arithmetic of a single sector, and in that single sector, the change is enormous. At the Verville draw, the sector the Americans called Dog Green, the first wave in history was effectively destroyed. Company A of the 116th Infantry Regiment landed here at 6:30 and was shattered in minutes. Many of those men came from a single small town, Bedford, Virginia. By the end of the day, Bedford had lost 19 of its sons, most of them killed in the first minutes on Dog Green, the highest known per capita loss of any community in America on D-Day. A town of a few thousand people sent its young men to this exact strip of sand, and they died here almost before the battle began. In this scenario, in this sector, most of those men live. The interlocking fire that killed Company A at the waterline is suppressed by a tank that the Germans cannot stop, and the men who in history fell in the first 30 seconds instead make it across the sand behind 73 tons of armor. The telegrams that arrived in Bedford in the summer of 1944, so many at once that the town has never fully recovered from them, mostly do not arrive in this version. The fathers come home, the sons grow old. That is what 1 tank does, and it is also the exact measure of what it does not do, because 3 miles east, the telegrams still go out. By midday, the Verville draw is open and traffic is moving inland through it. The bluff that dominated the western beach is in American hands, hours ahead of history. The 352nd Division's defense in this sector has collapsed not because it was weak, it was stronger than the Allies believed, but because no defense built in 1944 was designed against the thing that came ashore on that hovercraft. The intelligence failure that made Omaha a slaughter in the real battle does not matter here, because the strength of the defenders was never the variable that decided this sector. The men of the modern company will spend the rest of the day doing what infantry has always done, clearing positions, treating wounded, pushing inland off the high ground toward the villages beyond the bluff. They will not be able to explain to the soldiers around them where they came from, and most of them will never try. They fought on a beach that was already one of the most famous places in the world before any of them were born, alongside men whose grandchildren would study this morning in school. The bulge taught a lesson, and Omaha teaches the same one from a different direction. Modern technology does not erase a war. It does not remove the need for men to cross open ground into prepared fire and take the high ground with rifles and grenades and their own lives. What it changes is the cost, in the one place it happens to be standing. Omaha was always going to be taken. The Allies were always going to win the beach, because behind the first wave were more waves, and behind those were the resources of 3 nations that the German defenders could not match. The only thing ever in question at Omaha was the price. In history, the price was close to 2,400 American casualties on 5 miles of sand in a single morning. One tank, at one draw, lowers that price for the men lucky enough to land in its shadow. It does nothing at all for the men who land 3 miles away. And that is the truest thing the scenario reveals. Not that modern technology is unstoppable, but that even something unstoppable can only stand in one place at a time, while the rest of the beach pays the bill that history already wrote. The young men of Bedford, Virginia, in the sector where the tank came ashore, get to find out what the rest of the century would have held for them. The young men 3 miles east do not. That is the difference one impossible machine makes on a 5-mile beach. It is everything, and it is not nearly enough, and both of those are true at the same time.